I am only as evil as my worst sin, the chasms of my own depravity. I'm not convinced that anyone can be innocent in their purest light. To some extent, we are all marked. I was gifted with the task of endeavoring to understand true evil. I was also blessed with the ability to see in the dark, as if the horrors of dusk were roaming in broad daylight. If it is true that I'm only as evil as the worst of my deeds, then it must be indeed true that I am not the worst of common men. But the kind of malice that would make anyone else sick pales in comparison to the crooked beast of this world, the entity that I struck a deal with. It cost me everything, and even at this very moment, I can't decide if it was ever worth it after all. I have no regrets for anything I did, but I feel I must challenge the price, even if it cannot be taken back. There was no other way. I had to know. The blood had to be spilled. The hunt never starts as a reprieve from boredom. My warpath was fueled by curiosity. What is a man driven to do when he knows he can evade justice? How far will he go when he is only held accountable to the God he disobeys? The kinds of malice that comes to mind are history's most notorious, most prolific serial killers, mass murderers, and bloodthirsty dictators. But while those mongers of death were impressive in their accomplishments, I yearn to understand the evil that lurks in everyone. The strain of hate that hides itself until there is no other recourse. It is primal, animalistic, an act of barbaricism. One could argue that when somebody is driven to such drastic lengths, they are devoid of emotion entirely. But when there's no going back, survival is only secured when the will to live entwines with absolute fury. Clive wasn't built for a world beyond strict morality, the things society deemed were right or wrong, black and white or ambiguous and gray. I live in the gray area. I've been there mentally all my life. I grew up watching the news and reading about man's atrocities on the internet, but he chose to find the morsels of goodness in the small things they did to uplift their communities. He was not gifted like I, but he found purpose even without a defined meaning. A part of me always admired him for it, but I disagreed with his worldview. I never bothered telling anyone about my natural ability to peer seamlessly through pitch darkness. I had already figured out from a young age that no one would believe me even if I had a way to demonstrate it. Then, as I grew a bit older, I pondered why I seemed to be the only one that had such a condition. It dawned on me that it must be because I've been given it as a gift. My eyes were a part of my quest for knowledge, the root of evil that grows within all. My eyes would show me the stratospheric vertigo of the wicked. As a child, I learned to be good at playing the part of a regular human. I gave a convincing performance, laughed at ridiculous jokes, feigned concern for them when they, for some reason, sought refuge on my shoulder for them to lean on. I went along with all of it, pretending to feel anything when we bantered, poking harmless fun. I certainly had them fooled. But I never put on a masquerade for Clive. I'd tell him about how rotten I think people are, and he'd simply brush it off by saying that love is in far more abundance. I'd never understood what kind of ratio he measured because I see much more cruelty in a grocery store than kindness in a cathedral. I've remembered thinking for a time that Clive had to be some miracle from God's workshop to be so innocent and trusting in everyone. Hell, maybe he was meant to be my counterweight, as if to be the polar opposite of my night vision. Perhaps he was the better man for not needing blessings. But that's absurd, of course. Humans aren't blessed in their own world. Death is the language of their existence, the punctuation at the end of their sentences. Murder is practically the quill. He was the first and only person that engaged with what I said and didn't cast judgment on it, even if he massively disagreed with many of my ideas. Most of the others would have immediately ostracized me. I didn't forget my mission when I spent calm afternoons and cheery evenings hanging out with him, but I felt that he was the closest thing I had to a true friend. Maybe everything that unfolded could have been creased differently if I kept him at arm's length for just a while longer. It was only for the pursuit of knowledge. No, I need to remind myself that it had to be done. I first encountered the foul entity on a moonless night in the depths of the lush forest near our town. Often, I would go for nature walks to keep a clear head. I felt temporarily safe in the twigs and shrubs, obscured for just a moment from the incessant lights of the man's world. I was delivered unto the feeding ground of an abomination older than the hills. My stroll started out as any other, a lot of staring off at the ground while I maneuvered calmly between the trees, occasionally looking up at the ashen gray abyss in my altered vision, until I tilted my head back down and noticed something odd. The path was completely different. I'd wandered it enough times even in pitch darkness to know exactly where each branch had been at what angle. This was not my trail at all. My navigational skills were exceptionally sharp, but I could not make heads or tails of where I was. I decided to stay calm and weigh my options. It could have been dangerous to continue forward without recognizing my surroundings. That was a sure way to get myself stranded. I turned around to try to gauge where I'd come from, but not even the path behind me appeared familiar. It was similar only in the sense that the clearing was exactly the same shape. But the bark had been peeled from the trees, the grass had been trampled and rotten. The surrounding woods were dead silent as well, the call sign of a deadly predator. Am I not alone here? I thought to myself, scanning around yet seeing nothing else with my gifted sight. An ear-piercing shriek erupted the quiet and caused me to nearly jump out of my skin for the first time in my life. It sounded visceral, primal, afraid.
Somebody, please help! Please!
I was overcome not with the need to help the poor soul. Rather, it was an affliction of curiosity. Was this an act of natural selection or a crime of conscious intent? Against every other instinct that would have stopped me, I crouched and began to sneak closer to the origin of the outburst of sound.
No! I don't want to die! Please! Leave me alone!
I carefully tiptoed over patches of leaves and sticks scattered on the forest floor.
Stay back! Fuck! Someone help me!
Just a few more yards until I could reach a good vantage point. The howling slowly became unintelligible as the sound of thrashing meat and ripping cloth drowned out his pleas. That was when I saw it. The thing that must have been 8 feet tall. It almost looked like a man. The skin was pulled taut, almost ready to burst around its frame. Along the tears, I can make out an inky gray liquid seeping through the flesh wounds. The face of the unfortunate soul it was wearing had hardened into a permanent expression of terror. Glowing white eyes appeared from within the stretched sockets as the being within scanned the surrounding area. Its arm was lodged in the man's chest up to its elbow, spilling guts and viscera onto the forest floor. It held him up in the air, and with morbid fascination, I watched as the man opened his mouth.
Please, help me!
It was puppeteering him somehow, stealing his voice in an attempt to lure in prey. Through the drooling nostrils of its human costume, it sniffed the air, only to instantly lock directly onto me. I froze, meeting its cold white dots. The world around me stopped moving, stopped breathing. All of my life reduced to a staring contest with evil beyond my level of understanding. Then I did something that not even I can explain in retrospect. I stood up, unblinking, staring back with my gifted eyes. Suddenly, I watched as its legs snapped and rotated backwards. In a flash of movement, it scampered back into the woods without breaking eye contact. The orbs of light grew so far away that they looked like stars in the black sky, still watching, still scurrying into the void of the evening meadows. If the thing really wanted to, it could easily have snatched me right up and worn my hide. Either it wanted to toy with me because it had nothing to lose, or it saw my gift. Somehow, inexplicably, it knew that I was special. It already had a victim in its clutches, so it wasn't exactly starving, but I couldn't help but wonder if it recognized that something was wrong with me. I spent the rest of the night trying to find my way back to the trail I knew while looking over my shoulder to see if it was following me. I couldn't help but feel giddy as I made it back home. So many possible points of intrigue. So much knowledge to be gained. What an incredible thing.
The world can never be an ideal place, but what makes life beautiful is its finite course. What makes the people in one's life special is that no one else could ever be like them. I think this world is flawed, but it's the only one we have, and I can only be grateful for all that I am given. I've grown up in this dingy little town my whole life, and though I can't say that every day is sunshine and rainbows, the blissful moments are worth the struggle. I mean, I wouldn't have had it any other way. I wouldn't particularly say that I was popular in my circles, but I got around. I made valuable connections where it counted most. Elijah was an unlikely friend I made in my childhood. He tried to fit in, but even I could tell that he was troubled. I mean, he always kept to himself, and he never bothered anybody anyways. While everyone else would overlook his presence, I saw a unique shift in the energy of a room when he'd walk in and smile like he wasn't carrying some unspoken burden. I wouldn't call myself a mind reader by any stretch of the word, but I was told growing up that I had a strong intuition. I knew just by looking at him that he was unlike the rest. We didn't share that much in common, but that was never something I cared about. I enjoyed the air of silence that followed him around. Every time we hung out, it felt like the calmest reflection I'd ever known. I enjoyed the talks we had, even if I completely disagreed with his framework. He was a pessimist at heart. He saw nothing but evil in the world. It sounded to me like he just watched too much of the evening news. Incredible things happen every day. Death and injustice don't necessarily invalidate the glory of innocence. I didn't think Elijah himself was evil, but he believed that man's sins far outweighed his good deeds. All of this to say that I didn't draw hasty conclusions when rumors started circulating about a serial killer in our town. Nobody had any answers, so it became easy to blame the oddball. Easy to point fingers at the black sheep when the rest of the herd was scared. The first disappearance was a college student named Andrew Davidson. Fairly ordinary guy. People that knew him said they didn't think he'd have any enemies. All anybody knows was that one day, he merely vanished without a trace. He left campus for the day and was never seen by anybody ever again. I used that much information to deduce that whoever killed him must have committed the act indiscriminately. Either that or it was all some experiment. People would give Elijah strange looks as he walked by them, and I tried to tell him not to worry about it. He'd even try to pretend around them anymore either. He stopped wearing a smile around campus, stopped feigning interest in the topics he was studying. I saw him more for the individual that he was, just uninterested, distrusting, suspicious of everyone around him, stuck on the cruelty of his perceived world, and I felt sorry in a way for him. The next person that went missing was a middle-aged woman named Dawn Bellingham. Well, that was some interesting evidence. Usually serial killers operate with some consistent motive. Given that the incidents were not reported in quick succession, I found it strongly likely that whoever could have been killing them was acting with a conscious logic. They were not a crazed individual, and to some extent, they were conducting these as experiments. Another interesting point seemed to be that the two of them left from wherever they were at only to go missing afterwards. Could it have been that they were being lured? Were they headed to private meetings? Maybe in quiet places? There were dots I couldn't connect just yet, but I was sure to make a mental note of their connection. I sat with Elijah one night on my back porch, looking out at the forest and tilting our heads up at the macroscopic heavens. What do you think's really going on out there?
What do you mean out there? The stars or the woods?
Our town. Well, the stars too. That could be a cool conversation.
Well, I'll tell you one thing about the universe. Perched on each galaxy is an eternal, all-knowing God, and if they can see us, they're laughing. Suffering is entertainment when the cosmos is endlessly numb. This is all just a show.
I never learned anything about that in school. What kind of ganja are you smoking?
Maybe not the grand and mysterious, but if there is a creator, he does not take us seriously, can't reason with our logic, especially not with us picking off our own constantly.
If I'm not mistaken, the lady was from a couple blocks over, right?
Yeah, I heard. I hope the family members are doing okay. Nobody should ever have to go through that.
Yeah, for sure.
The entity that I encountered was classically known as a skinwalker, though I hadn't been able to find an account that described the one I bore witness to that night. That piqued my curiosity even more. What I was seeing was truly a unique display of wrath. I wasn't sure how to approach it conceptually because, in my mind, either it was merely hunting out of an instinct for survival or operating with calculated steps. For the first time in my life, I had to consider the possibility that the two could interact with one another to create the lowest states of depravity. It demonstrated enough intelligence to mimic the language and cadence of its victims, reducing their bodies to macabre sock puppets. Then, I assumed that it must also skin its prey and wear the flesh, as they typically do in folklore. My first encounter proved that much. If my developing theory was correct, perhaps it was capable of reason, which gave me an exhilarating idea. The initial attempt at communication with the skinwalker was unsuccessful. We gazed at one another once more in the stomping grounds. This time, it knew I was searching. It had to. It practically greeted me upon my arrival at the clearing where it all began. Greeted is a charitable word because, of course, it was hunched behind a tree with its arms wrenched into corpses almost out of my line of sight. It did not bolt away like the previous time, though. It slowly lifted one foot, snapped it backwards, and lifted the other until it left my vision. The second approach I took was trying to talk to it, at least a hello or something. All it did was lift one of the bodies and make the corpse laugh. That was perhaps a bit harsh. I was trying my best. Then it occurred to me that maybe, just maybe, hear me out. What it really needed was an offering. I felt bad about doing this, but I killed a squirrel with a sharp rock and brought it to the skinwalker as a sacrifice. I know, a ridiculous idea. What good would an animal that small do? I should have known that going into my fourth encounter with it. When I tossed the patch of fur into the clearing, it stared at it, then me, looking back and forth at least 3 times as if to say, "Seriously? You bring me these morsels?" Well, it was going to be a bit more of a pain in the ass, but I knew exactly what it wanted. I'd wanted to avoid involving myself too much, but I suppose I knew too much to call it quits. That was when I killed Andrew. Anyways, I was surprised at how difficult it was to drag a body through the dirt. I was physically drained by the time I reached the meeting location. When the skinwalker so much as glimpsed the man at my feet, I saw a content grin spread on its flesh. The human mask wasn't very receptive, but it definitely smiled at me.
Seems like we have an understanding of each other after all.
It rasped in the voice of a dead man. Its lips didn't line up as it spoke. I quietly chuckled to myself, feeling like a kid on Christmas that my theory was correct. You've seen my gift, haven't you?
And you see my curse. Our affordances and limitations are actually perfectly aligned. You know that, human?
It asked, pushing its body fully around the tree.
Our predispositions were created for one another. Mine is an old affliction. But you? No. I see you clearly. You could turn this hindrance into a weapon to understand the true origin of evil.
That is the meaning of my sight, and it has a purpose I'm ready to embrace. But tell me, how is it that you know of this blessing?
When you read between the trees and gaze into the lives of enough of my prey, you will know which one of them were chosen. They are scarce, and when one does happen upon my path, they challenge me. I don't think that's your strategy, though. Not because you would have been another voice in my choir. You aren't the type of man to wage a war. You've been trying to arrange a deal with me. Am I correct?
So it seems you can read me, just as I thought. This is as much of an experiment for you as it is for me. What is it you want from me if we are setting terms?
I want you to bring me more, dead or alive. Bring me more songbirds for my chorus. Someday, I will sound like an orchestration of destiny itself.
I stared at it, processing what it was telling me before I let slip a tiny grin.
And what do you want in return from me?
I want to see it all. Everything about how such cruelty is possible, where the hunt emerges from within my own nature. I want to know how you kill, and I want to see if it maps at all onto human judgment.
You will know when my composition is heard from all around. When those not yet integrated hear the harmony, they too will join the star gathering. I'll wear them all. I'll sing with their throats, turn these shackles into a weapon, and wield it like you would a sword.
It wasn't a pact made in blood. We didn't shake on it. The look plastered on my face was worth 1,000 words, and the rest was history. I knew that the truest test of my determination was only just the beginning. Before I wandered home, I spoke one last proclamation to my grotesque master. In your honor, this will be a forest of shattered bones.
Life only grew stranger as time dragged on. Soon enough, we weren't trying to find 2 missing people, but dozens. I lost track at some point. People were stocking up on supplies and planning not to leave their homes. Some thought we were in the end times. I didn't blame them, as I'd never seen anything like it either. Something else was really starting to raise alarm bells to me though. Elijah, his body language hadn't changed once. While the rest of us were shaken, he moved like nothing was wrong. I knew for a fact that even in nonverbal communication, people often betray how they really feel. Something had to be abnormal. Elijah may not have behaved like anyone else, but even I had to think that if it was truly mass murder, he'd at least have more to say about it. He was crazy for it, like true crime buffs. If I was to hear a theory about the disappearances from anyone, I'd have expected it to be from him. So, why was he so quiet? I didn't want to rush to conclusions. Of course, people had hunches, but the inclinations of any idea isn't proof in any form. I needed to know for sure. I wouldn't rest until I could lay down my head with an answer. After one of our hangouts on an overcast evening, I walked him to the front door and waited approximately 45 seconds. My plan was to sneak out from the backyard and tail him in the shadows from a distance. I know how it sounded, drastic and honestly a bit creepy for me to do, but if I didn't, would I ever have certainty? Could I ever be 100% sure that it wasn't him? I knew where his house was, and I could confirm that we definitely weren't walking home. And it couldn't have even been that we were headed toward any of the shops in town. We were headed for the woods? More sirens started going off in my head. What could he possibly have been going there for? The terrain was difficult to navigate, especially while trying to remain absolutely silent. Thick vegetation obscured my view of Elijah up ahead, and if I wanted to learn the truth, I had to keep up. After about 20 minutes of tiptoeing over branches and piles of leaves, the ground beneath my feet changed. I couldn't see my hands in front of my face, so I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The trees were all scraped with 3-line incisions as if a huge animal had scratched its claws against them. The shrubbery had died and began to fade as bushes gave way to flattened grass. I realized then that I stood on the precipice of a massive clearing, and he was there, glaring at me.
He played directly into my trap. His intuition was my bargaining chip to please the skinwalker. He was my closest friend, but he was the one who had sniffed me out first. He was a liability. One that I would mourn for the rest of my days. But my work here is far too important to be placed on death row. I have to fulfill my design.
What is all of this worth?
Clive asked, starting to look ill in my gifted vision. He was genuinely distraught, like his world might have fractured before his eyes. This was for you. I wanted to know why the goodness of this world was always bound to be tainted. I'd tell you to run, but you wouldn't make it very far.
Oh, wait, don't kill me, please. I swear I won't say a word of this.
Oh, but you will. And you'll tell all the king's horses and all the king's men. I care for you, deeply. And as much pain as I may feel in doing this is a sacrifice I must make for the pursuit of truth. I realized by the middle of my sentence that I couldn't stop smiling. It was all so amusing to me. I was trying not to let a laugh escape from my lips as his creeping dread turned to outright horror.
But by killing me, you're proving your own point. Think about it. Even if the world is rotten, there will always be innocent people with good hearts. Can't you see that? There's gotta be some part of you that knows I'm right.
Run, I whispered. God, the desire to cackle was practically rising through my chest. I told him to book it, even knowing it wouldn't do him any good because what difference did it make anymore? You will join the others and you will be stepping stones of my knowledge. Try to escape, please. The sorrow in my chest mixed in cataclysmic tidal forces with the hilarity of the situation. He shouldn't have had to pay the price, but it was the only way going forward. Clive refused to move and I didn't have the energy to say anything more. We kept our gazes firmly on one another while the pressure built up in my lungs. It's hard to remember the killing blow exactly as it was dealt. I just saw red. A temporary look of mortal panic before his face caved in, and I no longer recognized my best friend. I kept staring forward as his body was shoved into the dirt and broken down to bits and chunks. I was still spaced out when I heard his voice being absorbed by the gnarled appendage of the skinwalker. I stood unmoving like that until everything went silent once more. Until the body was gone. Until the beast retreated once more into the depths from which it came. Until sunlight subverted that horrible dusk. The worst part is that Clive was correct. I became the evil I wanted to understand. And I murdered the one person that could fracture my worldview. I murdered the only good man I knew, and I did it in the pursuit of understanding evil. I wielded it as a weapon without realizing I would only plunge the blade into my own stomach. It's all worth nothing, because Clive may have actually been a miracle from God, and I was the one that bastardized his trust. It turns out that I am the real evil of this world, but in saying that, I am still enshrined with this purpose. Clive won't be the last one. I still have a choir to create. There are voices that have not yet sung the word, and there will be no going back, for there's nothing left to return to. This is who I am. I won't stop until I've created my first ghost town. There are yet those who have not capitulated. I can see them all, sitting comfortably in their homes, staring at their screens. Listening to stories with headphones like this is all some medium of entertainment. I see them. This isn't over. I will have their throats.